You have to take risks wherever, in whichever profession you are in. You have to take risks. Only then you'll have higher rewards than average achievers. Which is important for everybody is to constantly reinvent yourself. It's important because your life is so short, and if you sort of get into one single stereotypical pattern throughout, they will be boring to yourself.
Welcome to Stories with Saachi. Today we have a very special guest, a man who's worn many hats, many exceptional hats at that, from leading India's prestigious Special Securities Force, NSG, as a senior IPS officer, to expressing his experiences and reflections through writing, and now through farming, experiencing a new chapter in his life. MA Ganapathy's journey is one of purpose, reinvention, and lifelong curiosity. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Lovely. So let's just go back to your early years, your childhood specifically. So you grew up in Coorg, which is this lovely, quaint hill station in the southern state of Karnataka. And I have been there once and I quite enjoyed my time there. So you were always surrounded by nature and your grandfather was a forester as well. So how have these early experiences shaped your outlook on life and perhaps the natural world?
Well, I think I've become a creature of landscapes, actually. So I was fortunate enough to be born in the real heart of Western Ghats, and it's shaped my outlook towards life in general as such. What's happened is I'm the happiest in a beautiful landscape, and I mean, on a lighter note, cityscapes give me a slight headache, although it's offset by the life opportunities it provides. So, as you said, much of my interest in wildlife and nature was also sparked by the stories my grandfather used to tell me. He was a forest officer. He was a ranger, in fact, who served in really remote corners of South India. So when I was small, he had already retired, but he used to recount those wonderful stories of gorgeous places, thrilling encounters with tigers, elephants, and all that. So those were sort of formative years, and it in many ways got imprinted in my psyche. And whenever I moved out of Coorg, when I think I was after school, so always I used to look for beautiful landscapes and used to feel happy there. And if the landscape is a little dull and uninteresting, I used to feel slightly sort of put off. So that's how it's shaped my sort of psyche, I can say.
And I think through your journey, or at least your policing career, you've been lucky to spend time in some of India's most remote corners and perhaps had firsthand wildlife experiences over there. And even now in Coorg, since you're back to farming, is there anything that comes to mind, something unforgettable, some face-to-face moment, or does that keep happening on the farm?
So I carried this interest, I mean, as I said, from my childhood. And I was fortunate enough in the sense that when I got into police service, I got Uttar Pradesh cadre. So my first thought was this is where those days Corbett National Park was there. Now it's Uttarakhand. So I always sort of, that kept me going actually. Initially, I was a little disappointed that I had to go so far away. Then, since I had read a lot of books, all the books by Jim Corbett, I felt a sort of sense, you can say, anticipation. So, although I've had many encounters as such with wildlife, but my very first tiger actually I saw it in Corbett Park. So that was really, something out of the world in the sense that all your people who have seen tigers in the zoo, it's so different to see it in the wild, in raw nature. And it was a magnificent male tiger, which I saw for the first time on an elephant back. So, although it was not very eventful, but the sheer grandeur of the animal was totally unbelievable. Seeing it in wild circumstances on the banks of Ramganga River. So Corbett is one of the greatest landscapes on earth. So to see a tiger for the very first time on a very first visit was really wonderful. Then I can say that, a very unexpected event which happened when I was in NSG in Manesa. I was walking and I saw a leopard bounding away gracefully. So, leopard on foot is really a thrilling experience. And for not a very regular wildlifer, I mean, some people may get scared, but I realize that the animals are more scared of humans in that sense. So the ultimate result is that, I loved lush landscapes, forests, wildlife, nature, etc. So I had this exposure of going to so many wonderful places because of my profession. So I thought I should give something back to nature. So when I was in NSG, so we made a plan to rewild the Aravallis. The Aravallis, as you know, is overgrown with invasive species called Prosopis juliflora, Vilaiki kika. So that's a monoculture which has got no real ecological benefits. So we took up nearly 600 acres of Aravallis and we wilded them with local species. And subsequently, even my successors have looked after it, and it's a beautiful landscape now. But unfortunately, public have no access to it. But I'm sure it serves a good ecological purpose for residents of Gurgaon and surrounding areas.
I think that's a very important initiative you took on because, well, I live in Gurgaon as well, and there are lots of conversations generally about how our forest cover is deteriorating, and of course, the Aravali biodiversity around Gurgaon also has been depleted, and how important it is to protect it. So I think that's something brilliant that you've left behind, and I hope it can be carried on further as well. And I think this would be a good time to pivot from planting those indigenous species from the Aravali to now planting species from all over India, I believe, at your farm at Coorg. So tell us about that switch. How did that happen from being a top cop to now being a farmer? And just for your info, I also come from a farming background. My father's side of the family has the farms in Rajasthan since many, many years. So, that's another area I find some common ground with you.
So farming is also in my genes actually. Most people in Coorg cultivate coffee, pepper, and in the olden days it used to be rice. So actually, I think most people are nostalgic about their childhood, especially if they moved from the place of their birth. They sort of yearn to go back to those days when, things were simple and people were kind and that kind of a scene. So after I retired, we had a lot of vacant patches of land. So I made a plan that I would plant every inch of this land with something or the other. So in the process, I took up cultivation of what is typical to that part of the world, which is coffee and also pepper, and something new was areca. And also I did a bit of avocado and all that, which are the new fancy things which apparently gives better returns. But in the process, I realized that if you get into an area without, full knowledge, so it's a challenge. So you have to search your way through. So after grappling initially, I got the hang of it. But agriculture is extremely challenging. I think it's more challenging than police profession, in the sense there are so many adversities. So, for example, the input costs are very high, and the costs you get for the produce, the price you get is almost like static. And also, you have these unpredictable weather events and pest infestations. And the new challenge is wild animals in Coorg, especially elephant herds, which come and destroy your, especially any tree which is standing, sometimes, unintentionally, also sometimes intentionally. So they destroy it. And especially, you can't grow any crops like rice and all that anymore because one fine knives, they'll come and destroy and the entire crop, and you're left with nothing. So all these are challenges, but it has its own rewards in the sense that it's deeply satisfying. Working the land is somewhere deeply satisfying. And in spite of all the adversities, I think nature has some very peculiar way of rewarding your good intentions. Ultimately, things fall into place, and you get that satisfaction of seeing something being produced
What's
right in
your
front of
favorite
you.
fruit or vegetable you've grown so far, or that you're proud of?
No, the vegetables I don't grow, but coffee we have. Some old parts of the estate is still productive, so we have that. We have paper, and the new crop is avocado, which is still coming up, and areca nut, which has just started yielding. So last 2 years was basically spent on filling up all the vacant places in the land, and more or less I've succeeded. By the way, I have moved out and now taken up another corporate job. So that part, I juggle the two together, which is a little difficult. But you do need, flow of cash to ensure that your agriculture is in place, actually.
So, by the way, since you mentioned avocados, that was also a dream of mine. At some point in time, long before avocados became so popular, I was thinking of having my own little plantation of avocados. Never got around to it, but I'm glad that you, of course, have that as part of the crop that you're growing.
I don't know
Tell
whether
us about
I
the
don't know whether
switch.
it'll grow in north.
I was going to probably take up some land in the south somewhere. That was the plan, which
Okay.
was maybe implemented. So just tell us about the switch. So you said, from farming, now you're back in the corporate world. In fact, that's where you are right now. So how is this? How do you keep reinventing yourself, or what does every new chapter in your life, whether it's being a police officer or a farmer and now a corporate professional, what have all of these different hats that you worn taught you? And is there any tips you can share with people who might be contemplating a major shift or change in their own lives? How does one do it?
So I'm a restless person by nature, actually. So if I'm not doing anything, I feel,
Me too.
really slightly depressed, actually. So, but then having said that, on a serious note, if you want to switch any kind of career or get into new areas, one thing I've realized is you need to really know your craft in depth. I mean, whether it's policing or farming or even writing a book or any new switches you make in life, you need to get into the nitty gritties and find out the details, and also have deep knowledge. Otherwise, you can't do justice to it. So why I've changed so many avatars is basically because, as I said, I'm restless by nature, but also when I set upon something, I give it everything I have. So if I'm sort of focused on farming, I give it my 100%. So if I was into policing and I gave my 100% into the profession. So what drives me is basically the fact that, you need to change according to phases in your life. Actually, that's what I feel, that human being has a productive life of maybe 75 years. Thereafter, I think the deterioration starts, and each phase of life is different. In the beginning, you get into a profession, and that's a whole different kind of a world, especially if you're in the government. And then once you have done that, I think the perspective also changes. As you grow older, your perspective towards life changes, and you have to make those adjustments. So now I'm working for a corporate group. So I mean, I find it extremely interesting in the sense that mostly there are young people here with a lot of energy. So, like Lord Voldemort of Harry Potter, I sort of suck their energy and regenerate myself in a positive sense. So it's very interesting.
You have a lot of energy yourself as well. Could give any youngster a run for their money. Definitely.
Yeah. So energy, yeah, I mean, I have that kind of energy and drive, but I find that young people are much more driven, and compared to my generation, they are always on the move to some extent. Gen Z, especially, I think they're always in a hurry. So there are many things you can learn from them. Actually, like my generation was always worried about the future, like you have to save and you have to build up your financial stability and stuff like that. Whereas the younger generation is so risk taking. They're not bothered about tomorrow. They are happy in their current state of mind or current state of affair. They're quite happy that way. So that's one thing I also learned from them, that, you shouldn't worry too much about the future, but be always in the present.
Nice. So live in the moment, basically. That's interesting to hear. You're also learning from Gen Z, of course. There are different set of people, I would say. I'm a millennial myself, but yeah, quite a slightly bunch of people. Um, Throughout your career and the way you've moved on from one goal or one chapter in your life to another, you've managed large, complex organizations, handled crises at a national level. And now, of course, you're a corporate professional, and I'm sure there are all sorts of issues that rise from time to time. And as a farmer, you have to be patient. And like you said, there are external factors at play. But overall, how does one keep it together as a leader? Is there any timeless leadership lesson across all of the phases of your life which you feel that is something that people should imbibe, people looking for success or moving ahead in life?
Yeah, as I said, you can only lead if you have a very good idea of what you're doing in any profession. As I said earlier, you need that in-depth knowledge of what you're doing in any profession. Once you have that,
Of a
you
subject,
need
basically.
to have, yeah, of the subject. So once you have that, then it's the emotional connect you develop with your people around you. That's very important. I think emotional quotient is one of the most underrated, at the same time, most important aspects of leadership. And apart from that, you also need to be forward looking. I mean, you can't, if you're a leader, you can't stay in the present. You have to think of years ahead, months ahead, the medium term, the long term. You should, visualize what's going to happen and also plan for it. And then lastly, you need to take risks. It's important that leaders take risks. So risks brings rewards, whereas a very sort of static, status quoist approach never brings rewards in any area of life. So risk taking is extremely important. But then leadership also takes a toll on you. To lead is not easy, it draws blood. You also become unpopular if you rise in any profession. So that's the downside of leadership. You can be a very sort of a mediocre person and still reach somewhere. Whereas if you're a leader and you sort of really aspire to lead and reach greater heights, the positive side also comes with some downsides, in the sense that you may not be very popular and people even sort of may not always uh, admire you in that sense. So it comes with some downsides, but it's worth the effort. Otherwise, any profession without leadership, will be a very dull kind of a situation, and you can't excel.
Right. And these days, our world is in quite a lot of distress, and we see many world leaders from different parts of the world, of course, some more prominent than the other, making certain decisions that people like us to question. So I think that's where the unpopularity part of it comes through. But what's your take in terms of leadership being applied by world leaders, without naming anyone, of course? But do you think we are
I
moving in the right direction? I just mean from a leadership point of view, not from a world.
So leadership comes in all shades and hues, isn't it? You have good leaders, bad leaders. There can't be indifferent leaders. So, for example, even in a underworld or criminal network, also you need leadership to lead a sort of syndicate or a mafia. So, leadership is not a concept where it's always positive. So, and there are many shortcuts to leadership also. Gullible people can be misled to some extent by clever manipulation of communication. All that is, I mean, if you read, uh, do you read Hariri? He has come up with such wonderful works where it dissects how even, communication plays such an important role in leadership, and how communication can also obfuscate bad intentions sometimes. So you have all kinds of leaders. I don't want to comment on any particular action of any leader, but leadership is an area which is sort of, you can do a world of good, and at the same time it also needs leadership to do a world of bad, or even to run a mafia or a syndicate, you still need leadership. So hopefully, I think as a planet which is sort of already in much distress, we need more and more leaders with good intentions to lead us.
I agree. I think that's definitely very well put because we do need more good in the world. And let's see how it goes further. Now we'll just shift gears a little bit and talk about your writing. So, your creativity. When did that creative spark hit you? When did you start writing? And in what form? Before you wrote your book, of course, which we're going to talk about. I do have a copy right here, Whispers in the Shadows.
Thank you for reading my book. Writing was a sort of passion for me always. So uh, it sort of got honed on official files at some point of time. I used to write rather flowery kind of notes on official files because I had no other
Hopefully, people
outlet.
understand it.
Yeah, sometimes they did. Sometimes they thought it was a little sort of over the top, but
Okay.
so, but I always had this urge because I used to read books right from a very young age. That was my main sort of passion, reading books, especially classics in any language. I mean, English, of course, and also even Kannada literature had a lot of wonderful writers. So I used to read books, so that passion got converted to writing. And then I used to write some articles for professional magazines on sort of policing and stuff like that. Then I slowly graduated to writing about nature and stuff. So finally, I thought I should do a book also. Or I thought I should do many books, but then after writing one, it sort of dawned on me that it's not easy to get a publisher, number one. And it's not so easy to write also in a very prolific manner as some people do. It's hard work. So coming back to my book, as you said, it's called Whispers in the Shadows. So it chronicles the life of a fictional police officer named Avinash. So the sum and substance of the book is that he investigates many crimes, and sometimes or most of the time he fails, and then there is a sort of a supernatural intervention and the victims get justice.
So, by the way, tend to stay away from horror when it comes to films and books. But of course, I read yours and I was hooked. So for anyone who's into horror genre or paranormal, I would highly recommend it. The chapter on A Shriek in the Woods really stayed with me. Now, I've read this a long, long time ago, and I tend to have a very vivid imagination. So you go to all these hill stations which have all these spooky stories. So I'm from Chandigarh, and the closest hill station is Kasali, and that was also a British cantonment. So you hear all of these stories when you're in the forest out for a walk, etc. So I just want to understand, for somebody like you who's had a long policing career where you've probably dealt with a lot of evidence, facts, logic, where did this come in? Because this doesn't really follow logic so much. So what was it that drew you into this?
So, the stories are partly true in the sense most of them, the crimes should have actually happened in some of those cases. But the endings are a little different because you have to sort of camouflage the identity of the victims or the perpetrators, etc. It's not exactly horror. You can say there is a paranormal ending to the events. So that's basically my writer's license. And why paranormal? Because I was always curious about this phenomena. As I told you, my grandfather used to tell me many stories of odd events which he had encountered in his career as a forest officer. So he was almost a borderline atheist. I mean, he never believed in any superstition and stuff like that. But some of the stories he told me struck me as rather unusual and odd. So, and also, if you come from a place like Coorg or any hill station or a small town, you have a lot of stories about odd happenings in certain places and stuff like that. For example, you talked about shrieks in the wood. Shrieks in the wood is the first story.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so there is a belief in our part of the world, in Coorg, that in certain forests, there are certain spirits who reside. And they're generally good spirits, but they have their own domain there and do certain things. And in a sense, they protect the forest also. In a sense, they scare people also. So these are based on some belief systems. And similarly, there are other stories based in different parts of India. For example, some are based in UP and some are in Uttarakhand. So these are stories one hears from, sometimes from the subordinates. Most police officers are quite superstitious, especially those who man the police stations. They have some quaint kind of belief system. So quite often we fail to solve a crime, for example. It becomes a challenge. And then I've seen many, policemen going and seeking help of astrologers, or not exactly astrologers, you can say.
Deities, I think,
Yeah, yeah.
or mediums.
Yeah, some kind of witch doctors, you can say, and I mean, in a loose sense. So, not that it ever worked. I mean, I'm quite so sort of don't really. I'm not a superstitious person, but I thought, as a writer, you should make it interesting for the reader. Number one, and also give them some sense of wonderment that there can be a possibility that life is not so simple as we see it. There are things which we don't comprehend, things which are beyond our understanding. So, number one, to make the stories more interesting. Number two, the stories I'd heard. And number three, to give them a sense of wonder, I've incorporated real life situations with some kind of paranormal endings.
Did you ever have any encounter? Something
I'll,
like this?
I'll, I'll reserve that sort of comment because
It could
then
be even at your farm and cool. That's fine because I've had plenty of paranormal experiences, which is why I tend to stay away from all of this. But this was your book and I had to read it. So I did. Was brave
so,
enough to do that. But
so
yeah, there's lots of
yeah,
spirits everywhere.
apparently, paranormal events happen to only those people who really believe in it.
Sorry,
So,
who lives?
those who really believe in it, paranormal events happen to only those people who really believe in it. If you're a total non-believer, apparently it doesn't happen to you. So that's how it works.
Well, I would say then we're the lucky ones or the unlucky ones, however you want to say it. Is there any case from your police career where something that just stands out without obviously going into details about it, but that you were unable to solve when there was no rational reason for it, which probably also led you to discover this side in your writing?
Yeah, it happens. It happens with every police officer. There are certain cases which you can't solve at all, however hard you try. So sometimes you do solve and still the perpetrator gets away. Maybe because of some loopholes in the system, loopholes in the legal sort of framework, etc. So that's where, in my stories, some of the stories, paranormal intervention takes place. So, in a sense, it's a reflection of my own failures. I mean, although Avinash is not me in total sense, but it also reflects a side of me where, you know, quite often it happens with anybody that you fail to solve a case and it sort of really pricks your conscience. You try very hard. Or sometimes you even sort of crack a case, but still the perpetrator gets away. So to sort of put all that together in a story form, some of those stories, it's a reflection of that, actually.
Mm. What's your take? Are some people just looking when they don't find answers to something that might happen to them or their loved ones? Do you think they just tend to go this way because there's no closure? For lack of a closure, they try to think that there might be something beyond the obvious that might be at play.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Ultimately, when, things which you can't comprehend. For example, quite often, even as police officers, sometimes you're taken aback by the sheer brutality of the crime, for example. I mean, it really sort of hits you. I mean, the common people, of course, are not so inured to it. But even as a police officer, sometimes you experience things which are really terrible. And then you tend to philosophize that, it's destiny, the person's destiny, or especially when crimes happen with small children, that's particularly, it shakes your belief system, your conscience, and also your sort of how can the world be so cruel, that kind of a situation that happens to everybody in different aspects of life. So that's when you go back and try to make sense of it and fall back on supernatural or god or whatever entity you believe in. I think that's natural for most people. So that's how it works.
Right. And sir, you led one of India's most prestigious jobs or have been a top corporate. Of course, you've been in leadership positions beyond that as well as you are right now. But how do you remain so grounded and humble? Because that's a quality which I feel many leaders need to imbibe. So, what can they learn from you, anyone aspiring to be a leader who is talking one thing?
So why do I stay grounded? I think mainly because I'm sort of content with myself. I don't seek validation from anybody, so I don't have to pretend to be anything else. Also, I understand, the idea of mortality is very sort of real for everybody. So once you understand that, I think you stay grounded. And also, I sort of follow some, for example, Carl Sagan, the physicist. So he's a sort of hero of mine, although I have very little acquaintance with physics and astronomy. But I always follow him, and one statement which he makes in his videos always stands out that, our planet is just a pale blue dot in the universe. It's so insignificant. And when the planet itself is so insignificant in the cosmic scheme of things, the inhabitants in that planet also have very sort of limited, you can say, bandwidth in the universe. So once you realize that, and the idea that you are just a mere mortal and you are here for a short time, I think much of your ego sort of dissipates. And then you stay grounded. Although I think in this country, it's considered a sign of weakness. I think if you stay grounded, people sometimes don't take you very seriously.
I feel that as well because in my professional life as well, of course, I am a leader, but I do tend to remain grounded. Like you said, I resonate with that completely because it's all fleeting, right? Where we are today, God knows where we are tomorrow. Let's just do the best, try to encourage people and inspire our stories and your story as well. But yes, you're right. I think in a country like ours, it is looked down upon. So you have to, show your fiery side. So we're going to just do a few quick questions. These are supposed to be short answers, maybe a few words or up to a sentence.
Sure, sure.
All right. So after everything you've seen in life, what still scares you?
Nothing really scares me as such, but I mean, a metaphysical thing doesn't scare me. But yeah, if you really want to know what scares me is I may wake up one fine morning and stop smiling at simple pleasures of life. That I'll become very disgruntled and negative and grumpy. So that maybe scares me a little bit, that you wake up and then you don't even appreciate small, simple, happy things in life.
Who has influenced your thinking books?
See, not any single book. As I said, I read all kinds of books, but if you really
Maybe
want to
two,
know,
three of them, whatever
yeah.
comes to it.
So I always liked uh, Charles Dickens. His works have inspired me. Great Expectations, David Copperfield, especially. If you really want to know the books which stand out, they are the ones. But otherwise, I read like Russian classics also. Tolstoy, War and Peace was an epic book. Uh, I like even modern writers also. Anybody who writes well, I'm deeply inspired. So I sort of collect ideas and thoughts from all books and try to keep it in my mind. And if a single book you want to know, it's Great Expectations.
And have any of these books or these writers inspired you to write a certain way, or is there something you've taken away from them which you inculcate in your writing or in your book?
No, you can say I've copied Ruskin Bond badly.
I think we all tend to copy Ruskin Bond. I really adore him as well. I haven't had a chance to meet him, but it's brilliant that he has given you a little note
I
on the
really,
cover of your book.
I sort of extorted it out of him in the sense that I was Uttarakhand cadre, so I
Yes.
requested him for a forward for the book, but he said, that will be really asking for too much. So I'll give you something called, he called it a reference or something. So that was a reference. So he was very kind enough. So I sent him a copy of my book. I don't know whether he bothered to read it, but definitely the style is partly Ruskin Bond and partly there was a Shikar writer called Kenneth Anderson. I don't think many people in the North would have read him. He was a South based Shikar writer, Kenneth Anderson. So I've copied his style. I mean, in the sense, some of the ideas and some of the settings. So these two are the sort of uh, people on whom I modeled some of my stories.
Right. Really go towards the leadership side again. What habits do high achievers consistently have that average performers do not, according to you?
Risk taking, as I said earlier, you have to take risks wherever, in whichever profession you are in. You have to take risks, only then you'll have higher rewards than average achievers. But risk taking comes with many flip sides, as I said. But at the same time, thing which is important for everybody is to constantly reinvent yourself. It's important because your life is so short, and if you sort of get into one single stereotypical pattern throughout, I think it'll be boring to yourself. I mean, you'll be bored of yourself. So you need to have that constant urge to look for new things and take risks. And why risk is very important is people mostly will discourage you. For example, tomorrow, if you want to change profession, people say, oh, don't. I mean, nobody will encourage risk taking. That's a human tendency. Once anybody gets into a comfort zone, one would like to continue in that. That's human tendency. So to be a high achiever, I think you have to take risks and believe in yourself.
Well, how to weigh your risk? Because sometimes you don't know, is it very, very risky or is it medium risky? So how does one weigh the scales? Do you ask someone, a confidant or someone?
So ultimately, you have to define it yourself. It's your, not gut feeling. It should be thought out properly, but it's entirely up to you how you weigh it and how you upscale it or downscale it. But if you're made up your mind that, change is the essence of life, then sort of experience life in its full sort of potential, you do need to reinvent yourself at least twice or thrice in your lifespan. So that will make you an interesting person. And that's my sort of conclusion overall.
Is there a life lesson which you feel you learned too late?
As I said, I really don't I have no regrets, or I'm a fairly contented person, but Could I have done better? Yes, maybe. So what did I miss out on? I'm sort of a little unfiltered actually in all my dealings. So in both garment setup as well as in a sort of even a corporate setup, any setup, any relationship, you need to mask your feelings. You need to not speak your mind. You're thinking something, but you're saying something else. So I think if you really want to be successful in any area, at least till the age of 60 or something, don't speak your mind. So if I have to sort of go back 25 years ago, so I'll filter my thoughts and not speak my mind. Although it has worked for me. I mean, I can't say that, because I spoke my mind or is unfiltered, I've done badly. So, but that's one area where I'd sort of work on to conceal or mask my thoughts and not speak
Well,
it to
that's
the
probably
person.
what you would tell your, I don't know, 25-year-old self.
Yeah.
Well, that was a very enlightening conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I think there's lots for people to learn from everything that you shared about your career, your personal interests, creativity, and of course, leadership lessons along the way, which we all need to apply some facet or the other. And I really look forward to your next book. Are you working on something so far?
Only in my mind. So, as I said, writing a book is really hard work right now. So, I'm a little busy with work also. So, but that's definitely in my mind. Maybe after a couple of years, it'll be an entirely different genre, hopefully.
All right, we shall look forward to that. And thank you once again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you.